as we continue with part two of the Infinity Gauntlet, what we see is that we're picking up with Doctor Strange here. And again, what's taken place up to this point is that the Great Disappearance has taken place, as is referred to in the comics. That half the population on the planet Earth, as well as the universe, has simply just been blinked out of existence. And so what we'll see for the most part is virtual panic. We'll see a lot of superheroes trying to deal with this, trying to cope with this element of what it is that's taken place, both on the planet Earth and beyond. And what we see with Doctor Strange here is that he's gone to consult Dr. Hank Pym. Hank Pym has arrived at Doctor Strange's mansion, and the goal here is to try to find some way to restore the Silver Surfer back to health. But because of his alien physiology, because of the fact that he doesn't require any kind of nourishment to survive, it's kind of a coin flip here in terms of what they can do in order to restore him, or perhaps it's simply that he's just healing himself. And what we see is that Hank Pym says that he's done the best he can up to this point, that given the alien physiology of the Silver Surfer, that he's done everything he knows, and that all they can do is simply just wait. But what he also says is that he has to return to the West Coast Avengers due to what's happened with the disappearance in order to assist them as best he can, and that Doctor Strange may also want to go on to contact the original Avengers and let them know what's going on here. But what we see is that as Hank Pym begins to leave, Doctor Strange seems to be stuck in place. He seems to be kind of frozen in place, and one of his servants attempts to shake him out of it, but Doctor Strange appears to be falling into a trance. And what we see is that his spirit is more or less torn away from his body, that it is taken to a place that seems to exist beyond the physical realm, perhaps in some sort of soul, maybe middle ground or something like that. But what we see is that some unnamed individual, some sort of energy force, has drawn Doctor Strange's essence to him. And what he tells Doctor Strange when he asks what it is that he's doing here, who this individual is that he's here to help save this reality from the insanity of Thanos, but that he can't do it by himself. Doctor Strange replies by saying that if this individual wants him to gather up all these superheroes and all these righteous individuals for a conflict, then he needs to do something to demonstrate who he is, because these individuals most likely will not simply just unite under the single banner of a person that they know nothing about. And what we see this person saying is that he can open his soul. He can expose his soul directly to the soul of Doctor Strange. But the issue here is that because both of their souls will be exposed to one another, that there is an inherent danger here, that one of them could be destroyed or that they could meld into a single person. Doctor Strange says this is a risk that he wouldn't normally take, but because of the grave nature of the circumstances, that he will do whatever he needs to get any kind of help he can. And so what we see is that both of these individual souls are sort of combined into one, or at the very least, they're able to look into each other's souls. And when Doctor Strange looks into the soul of this unnamed individual, he develops complete and total trust. He now believes him and trusts in him implicitly, and says that he will do anything he needs to in order to assist this individual in any way that he can. From here, we switch to Doctor Doom, and what we see is that Doctor Doom is using his various technology and instrumentation at his disposal to trace the origin, to trace the location of the disappearance, and he traces the energies that caused the Great Disappearance onto the other side of the galaxy, on the far side of the Milky Way galaxy. And so the information that he has here is that, one, he knows where it is, but that two, he's also recognizing some kind of phenomena that seems to be very similar to the energies that caused the elimination of half the life in the universe, and that this phenomena is emanating from the residence of Doctor Strange. And so what we see Doctor Doom saying here is that this is his universe, these are his people on the planet Earth, and that no one has the right to go in and to effectively begin wreaking havoc without either speaking with him directly or somehow asking for his assistance or involving him in some manner. And so we see Doctor Doom undertaking the task of finding out what it is that has gone on here. But Doctor Doom, again, also has his own motives here, because because he sees this as a chance to expand his own power, given the great power that was used for this vast disappearance, and to also expand his scientific knowledge. And so this, for the most part, is the biggest reason why he's here, and we'll see that play out when we get to the actual conflict on the Shrine of Death out in space later on in the Infinity Gauntlet story. From here, we transition to Drax the Destroyer, Eros, and Firelord on Titan. And what we know here is that Mentor, who was the father of Eros and Thanos, is one of the individuals who has vanished from the universe. And what we see is that Isaac, again, the autonomous computer system within the fortress of Titan, so to speak, is informing Eros and Firelord and Drax the Destroyer that this is all a universal act, that this is all taking place across the universe, that it's not simply confined to Titan, it's not simply confined to the Milky Way galaxy, that all life in the universe has simply vanished. We then see that Eros simply just disappears. But what we know here is that Eros is not one of the individuals who has simply vanished due to the Great Vanishing, because this has already taken place. What we see is that Eros has been taken by Thanos. Thanos, presumably using the space gem, has transported Eros to his location. And Eros realizes that Thanos is in possession of the power gems. Now, what Eros tells us here is that he's familiar with the Infinity Gems. He's familiar with what it is that they can do. Now, how familiar he is with them is something that Marvel doesn't explain. He simply just tells us that he knows what they are. And he recognizes that with all of them on a single gauntlet, with all of them being wielded by one individual, that this individual possesses a power that is virtually unrivaled within the main Earth 616 Marvel universe. And so what we see is that Eros begins to look around, and he recognizes Mephisto, but he also recognizes Mistress Death. He recognizes Nebula, who's simply just walking around as a corpse, who is walking this fine line between life and death. Thanos says that this is a family reunion, that he has restored Nebula, or that he's brought Nebula to him, more or less poking fun at the fact that she had presented herself as a granddaughter to him falsely. And he also says that his mate, that his lover here, presumably playing the role of his wife, is Mistress Death, and that Mephisto is simply here as an advisor. Eros asks why Mentor isn't here, and Thanos replies that Mentor wasn't invited, nor will he be. And he says that he intentionally ensured that that Mentor was one of the individuals who was eliminated during the Great Vanishing, that he made sure that he was one of the people who was simply just blinked out of existence. And the reason why is because Mentor would attempt to find a way to take the Infinity Gauntlet from Thanos. He would try to find some way to bring this conquest to an end, and would be one of the few individuals within the Marvel Universe that would probably be able to do it, not in the sense of sheer raw power, but in the sense that he would be able to organize forces in such a way that he would be able to achieve this act. But what Thanos says is that ultimate power is now his, that he can reshape the universe with it, and that nothing can interfere with this mission. What we see Eros doing here is playing on this. Eros says that if this is what Thanos wants, then nothing will interfere, that he will do everything he can to help Thanos as best he can. But what we see Thanos realizing here is that Eros is using his powers to manipulate emotions on Thanos. And so Thanos simply says, how poignant, how powerful and charming can Eros be when he can't talk? And so he takes Eros's mouth away. From here, we see Thanos saying that this is how all things shall be from this point forward. Anything that irritates Thanos will simply just cease to be. At this point, we switch back to Captain America, and what we get here is more or less a list, not a full list, but a pretty significant list of which superheroes have gone missing as a result of the Great Vanishing. And this is a pretty important list, and the reason why is because throughout this conflict, a lot of you guys will ask questions like, where is Hercules? Where is Archangel? Where is the Invisible Woman, the Fantastic Four? Where is Night Thrasher or the Vindicator from Alpha Flight? You guys will ask a lot of these different questions on where these superheroes are. And so what Marvel has done is they've laid out some of the more significant members of the X-Men, the Avengers, Alpha Flight, and various other superhero teams that were relatively popular at the time this story was written, and simply said they're just not here anymore. They've simply just been among the individuals who have been blinked out of existence. And so what we see here is that Captain America, She-Hulk, and the man standing in the place of Thor, Eric Masterson, analyzing all this information. Now, this idea idea of Eric Masterson is something that I would like you to keep in the back of your head, because this again is not the real Thor. Now, the story in terms of how it is that Eric Masterson begins to undertake the role of Thor and how he takes over this role for a pretty good amount of time is a very, very good story. And so I'd like to do that justice, and we'll talk about that when we actually get into our discussion of Thor after we finish various characters when Infinity Gauntlet is over. But for the most part, all we need to do is simply just be aware of the fact that this is not Thor Odin's son. This is simply just Eric Masterson. And what we see is that all these individuals are focusing on the fact that things are, for the most part, very, very bad, that Eric Masterson is trying to undertake the role of Thor, trying to speak like Thor, trying to ensure that he's passed off as Thor, but that everybody else is trying to deal with the fact that some of the most prominent superheroes in the Marvel community are just gone. At this point, we switch to Odin, and what we see is that Odin is in Asgard, and he's wearing the ceremonial eye patch of sorrow. Now, this is something that a lot of people get confused. In the movie of Thor, we saw that Anthony Hopkins was wearing an eye patch. The eye patch is worn as a ceremonial thing. It's not something that Odin actually has to wear. He hasn't actually lost an eye. And for the most part, what we see here is that Odin has called together the Sky Fathers. Now, the Sky Fathers are what we would consider to be the old gods. These are people like Zeus, Osiris of Egypt. These are what we would look at to say that older parts of society, older parts of the world, generations and thousands of years ago, these were the people, these were the gods that ancient humanity worshipped. But in the Marvel Universe, these are actual beings. These are true beings. They may have been forgotten over the years. They may no longer be worshipped by people over the years, but it doesn't take away from the fact that they are real and they have a vast amount of power. And as these individuals form under the name of the Sky Father, they have, of the Sky Fathers, they have a significant amount of power. And what Odin does here is Odin calls them together, bands them together, and says that because of this great power, because of this great threat, that they need to fight together in order to try to defeat Thanos. But for the most part, this would be a laughable conquest at best, because the Sky Fathers, despite their vast power, have absolutely no ability to thwart the power of Thanos at all in any way. From here, we transition to Wendell Vaughn, to Quasar, and all we see with this bit of the story is that Quasar has simply arrived to a predestined or a arranged set of coordinates by Epoch. And what he simply says here is that he's just supposed to wait, that Quasar is simply just supposed to hold out here, that he's not supposed to do anything until he's instructed to. From here, we switch back to the story of Ralph, who has now undertaken the role of Pip the Troll. And for the most part, Pip the Troll is just the sidekick of Adam Warlock. And so all this really does is confirm that Adam Warlock is now he's now rejoining the physical Marvel universe. And what we see Pip the Troll here doing is simply just waiting for Adam Warlock to wake up, to come out of his cocoon. And as he's waiting, there's some kind of an explosion in the next room that throws him out of his seated position and into the TV, or simply just to a different part of the room. And when the explosion ends, he gets up and he goes into the next room and asks this individual, since they can't stay here anymore, where it is that they're supposed to go. And this individual replies by saying, after Thanos. From here, we switch back to Dr. Doom at the residence of Doctor Strange. And what we see is that the Silver Surfer has now woken up. He's now come to. And Dr. Doom has his Doombots restraining Doctor Strange. And what we see is Doctor Strange pleading with Dr. Doom, saying that he is meddling in dangers that he doesn't really understand. He doesn't really know what's going on here. But what we see is that the Silver Surfer tries to stop Dr. Doom. He tries to overpower Dr. Doom. But Dr. Doom uses his power to overpower the Silver Surfer. Now, under normal circumstances, this would not happen. Dr. Doom would not be able to overpower the Silver Surfer despite his vast power. But the Silver Surfer is in a weakened position here. He's very, very weak, and so he doesn't have his full physical strength. Otherwise, he would easily be able to stop Dr. Doom. From here, we see that Dr. Doom turns his power against Doctor Strange, and what he wants to know is what's happened here. He wants to know everything that has taken place as far as this great disappearance and the forces behind it. Now, Doctor Strange initially doesn't say anything. Doctor Strange initially doesn't speak. But what we see is that before Doctor Strange can say anything, there's an explosion behind them. And we see that Doctor Doom, the Silver Surfer, and Doctor Strange all look around. At this point, we see Adam Warlock has arrived. And Adam Warlock simply just replies by saying that in his time, he was called Adam Warlock, and that they may also do so if they feel inclined. From here, we switch back to Thanos, and what we see is that Thanos is using the power of the Infinity Gauntlet to more or less either psychologically or possibly even physically torture Eros and Nebula. And again, he's doing this as a way to satisfy, to please Mistress Death. But Mistress Death doesn't really seem to find this the slightest bit interesting. She doesn't find it at all satisfying. It's simply just something she pays no attention to or doesn't really give any kind of credence to. From here, we see Eros, after the torture is ended, looking at Thanos and coming to this realization that the Infinity Gauntlet has driven Thanos insane, that this power has driven him out of his mind, and that on a whim, due to his insanity, he could simply just eliminate the universe. And so this is when Eros really grasps what it is that's going on here and grasps the danger of this situation. From here, we transition back to Adam Warlock and Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom, and the Silver Surfer. And what we see Adam Warlock saying is more or less explaining how it was that Thanos was able to gain the Infinity Gauntlet, how it was that he was able to gain this vast power, and that he's arrived here in order to help bring an end to these schemes. Doctor Strange realizes that Adam Warlock was the one that communicated with him earlier when he came to this understanding of what it meant to undertake the role of uniting all of these superheroes. We also see Doctor Doom commenting and saying that this is a set of circumstances whose peril, whose danger almost rivals that of the coming of the Beyonder. Now, Doctor Doom says that it does rival the coming of the Beyonder, but there's a vast difference here. The Beyonder had power that dwarfed anything that the Infinity Gauntlet could do. He was from an entirely different universe, entirely different multiverse, and he had incredible power and could do pretty much anything that he wanted to. But we'll talk more about him again when we get into the Secret Wars 1 and 2 and the Beyonder. But what we see is that Adam Warlock says that this is going to be difficult. This is going to be a fight that will very well cost the lives of some individuals and will require 100% of everybody, because it's going to, they're basically going to be going against forces that are going to require cunning and guile to defeat as opposed to simply sheer power. From here, we see that Doctor Doom challenges Adam Warlock and asks him by what right it is that he claims the mantle of leadership. Adam Warlock replies here by saying that he is the one who battled Thanos previously, that he's the one that knows the secrets of the inner workings of the Infinity Gems, and so with that knowledge, he's the only one that's really equipped to combat Thanos. He's really the only one capable of going against Thanos and successfully being able to organize forces in an effective way to where Thanos can be defeated. At this point, we see Doctor Doom more or less counting his losses and just kind of accepting this and sort of moving forward. But what we'll see is that, again, this is not necessarily acquiescence by Doctor Doom so much as it is Doctor Doom just biding his time. What we also see is the Silver Surfer commenting on whether or not Adam Warlock is truly the person that should lead them. That is Adam Warlock really the best choice here? That Adam Warlock seems vastly different from the Adam Warlock that he had met in the Soul World. And so, because no one really knows anything about him, no one really knows anything about his motivations other than what he claims his motivations to be. From here, we transition back to Thanos, and again, we see Thanos manipulating reality to torture Eros and Nebula. And again, he's becoming extremely angry here. He's becoming extremely frustrated, because Mistress Death will not acknowledge him. Mistress Death will not return his affections. And we see him yelling at her. We see him screaming at her, asking what it is that it would take to please her. That he's done everything that she's asked. He's given her the entire universe. That he would do anything in order to make her love him. That all he asks here is that she simply just use her voice and speak his name aloud. And that would be enough. And so what we see is that Thanos, in his anger, lets off an energy blast. He lets off this massive force of energy in all directions. And what we see is that the first thing that encounters, or that is encountered by this energy blast, is a 20 million year old red giant. And what this red giant does is simply just destroy. It simply just explodes. And that's the end of it. From here, we see some kind of spaceship traveling through the cosmos. And the planet that the spaceship is approaching is destroyed. And we see an individual here telling us that the wrath of Thanos, the supreme being, is something to behold, that this planet is the second planet to be destroyed as this being was traveling to it, that is the second banquet that has been robbed from him. And what we see is that this person is Galactus, and Galactus is again attempting to satiate his hunger, but also recognizes that the vast power that Thanos has here is something that cannot be ignored, that is going to require that Galactus go through the process of bringing together a multitude of forces in terms of the cosmic entities in order to attempt to bring an end to the power that Thanos has here. And that the issue here is that the emanations that are being released here, that the power that is being displayed here by Thanos will reach the planet Earth, and that it will only contain about 2% of its power, but it will be a massive amount of energy nonetheless. And so what we see is that we transition to the planet Earth, and we see that Cloak, who is one half of the team Cloak and Dagger, is by himself, that Dagger is gone. She is one of the individuals who had simply been blinked out of existence, and that Cloak feels as though because his other half is gone, that while they were linked, while they were kind of like two halves as a whole as he describes it, that he doesn't really feel like he has a reason to go on. But what we see is that he finds this reason to continue as this force that was emitted by Thanos reaches the planet Earth and shakes the entire planet, crumbling several cities and wiping out the Japanese islands. And of course, we see that Cloak uses his ability to save various humans, to save them from their impending deaths of falling off buildings or else being crushed by rubble. From this point, we transition back to Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer, Doctor Doom, and Adam Warlock. And what we see here is that these individuals are trying to deal with the aftermath of this. They're trying to understand the aftermath of what's gone on here. That the power that Thanos has demonstrated, despite being on the other side of the galaxy, is a power that most of them couldn't really even fathom. And that it will take an incredible organization, an incredible upheaval for all of them to be able to go successfully go toe-to-toe with Thanos. And so what we see as a comment here, we see the question being asked, what was that? What was that energy blast? From here, we're going to bring an end to this video, and in the next video, we're going to pick up with battle formations, preparations for war, and we'll see that we're more or less seeing superheroes being organized. We're seeing superheroes being brought together by Adam Warlock as they begin the preparations for taking on Thanos. With that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.